Hey everyone, welcome to the Human Cloud Podcast, the spot where leaders come to drive the freelance economy forward. So today we have Ricky Willianto. Ricky is the CEO of Ravenry as well as Solos. Ravenry is a market research freelance network, and Solos is software built for freelancers. Ricky has a fascinating journey in that he started as a freelancer. He then built a marketplace. He then pivoted to the point that now Ravenry is a thriving market research network. Now, a couple things I want you to listen to. First is just, what is it like being an entrepreneur navigating in the freelance economy? Two is, what is required to really be successful? You're going to hear about all the pivots that he made with Ravenry. And third is just the fastest growing segment of freelance solutions being niche freelance platforms. So with Ricky and Ravenry, which by the way is based in Singapore, so you're going to hear about geographical differences. But with Ravenry, he's not saying here's a freelance marketplace. He's saying here's a better way to drive market research. And that way is through a freelance network. So you're going to hear about the differences between Singapore/Southeast Asia compared to the US and EU. You're going to hear about the difference in clients. And most importantly, you're just, like I said in the beginning, you're going to hear how to be a good entrepreneur operating in this arena. So with that said, sit back, then go drive some change. Listen, before we get started, let's talk real quick about the key to scaling and sustaining a freelance and solopreneur business. Listen, I know none of us got into freelancing because we wanted to be an accountant, unless you're a freelance accountant. But the reality is if we don't have the right financial structure, we're going to be hurting come tax season, which is why today's episode is brought to you by Collective, the all-in-one financial solution. Collective handles the main things that we all need from a financial and back office perspective. It handles incorporation, specifically the S Corp. It handles business taxes. It handles accounting. It handles bookkeeping, payroll, even compliance. And most important, it's not just the software. They have tax and accounting experts ready to help. Now, here's the deal. You do need to take action right now, specifically before June 30th, because if you have an LLC and you start on Collective, they can backdate your S Corp to January 1st. And the results are on average over $10,000 per year on tax savings with this structure. So I want you to go right now to collective.com/human cloud. Then go scale your freelance business. Ricky, what up, man?
Hey, Matthew. Thanks for having me.
You ready to have a perfect Wi-Fi episode?
We'll try. It's not up to us, but we'll try. We'll leave it to the internet gods.
Oh, man. I die over AI, just like a little tangent. Like everyone's been talking about it for a while, right? We still can't get meetings to work in a remote setting.
Oh, man.
And so once meetings are as easy as in person, then I'll start believing the hype. But until that happens, what the fuck? I will say it's a lot better now. But it used to be, remember, it'd be like Microsoft Teams would take like 10 minutes at minimum to start.
Oh,
and then like
I don't know why, but Microsoft Teams still do that to me sometimes.
and
Maybe I just don't know how to use technology. That's the problem.
Yeah. Well, when Teams, like if you were getting caught in the doom loop where you have multiple tenants open and it's just they will not work together and then you can't get into it. That's happened multiple times to me.
Oh, okay.
So yeah. Sorry if anyone's listening at Microsoft, please fix that. Please fix that. But listen, Ricky, let's first off, where are you still in Jakarta or where are you right now?
I am still in Jakarta, and we'll be traveling to Singapore soon, but still here.
So let's do, since last time the Wi-Fi was rough, let's do little fun questions at first. My first one's going to be, what's your favorite hawker center in Singapore?
I'd have to say Lau Pa Sat. I mean, like, it's the most iconic one. It's got everything, Have to go with that one.
That's not the CBD one, right? Which one's?
It is the CBD one.
It is the CBD, and at night it has the skewers and stuff.
That's right.
Oh, you tourist!
They close the road like in the evening, and they let the skewer hawker centers like operate there.
I'm going to sound like a super trashy American, but like they increased the price of the beer there. And I'll never forget, it was within 1 year. I was like, damn, inflation sucks.
They've increased a lot of things in Singapore, so I'm not surprised.
So okay, and you spend, what do you do? Do you do half your time in Singapore, or how do you distribute your time?
Yeah, I think in the past 12 months, probably about 30% Singapore, and then 35, Indonesia, 35 Thailand. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What got you to want to do that? Like, was that something that from a young age you were like, hey, I want to be this nomad type kind of thing, or what got you to do that?
That's a great question, but I don't think like the idea of being like a nomad or even like a digital nomad was ever like on my mind as a kid back then. I think I personally just like adventure, and I like change. I like different things. I like to experience new things. So it's just kind of natural for me to want to seek like the travel bit, like clients in different countries, just to make my life a bit more difficult, but also a little bit more exciting.
I feel you, man. So listen,
Yeah.
where I hope we get to, so in the next 45 minutes, I think here's my agenda. You ready? So
Okay.
I think I really, really want to understand, where do you see the freelance economy in Singapore and Southeast Asia? So that is definitely
Okay.
one thing we're gonna focus on.
Okay.
The second thing is, where do you see the freelance economy going? And I think that one's probably the most interesting. And they
Okay.
kind of do overlap. The third thing, which I think is more so just going to be learning about your background, what's fascinating to me is someone like you would usually be working at McKinsey, right? Or someone like you would be usually working at a tech company. And for some reason, our space is now able to attract people like you to hit your head against the wall so many times. So that's the three things that I'm like, hey, I can't wait to dig into this. But let's
Sure.
you want to start? You want to do a little boring intro about yourself, Ricky?
Sure. Yeah. Um, yeah. I think I'll do a bit of an intro and also I guess a bit of a genesis as to why I got into this freelancing thing. Right. So I basically have studied in Indonesia, Singapore, and then Australia. And I think through this experience, I've kind of like seen different kind of like working arrangements, different kind of working environments. Like in Indonesia, like you're either an entrepreneur or you work for someone like a big company, right? In Singapore, you are likely working for like a really big company or like an MNCs. And in Australia, I think it's interesting because that was kind of like when I was in uni, I started seeing the possibility of people like not really having full-time job, because in Australia, I think the whole freelancing movement is quite advanced. I would say they're quite mature, right? They have, I think, a lot of people choose to have that flexibility and basically do their own thing. They do their arts, their craft, and yeah, like they spend most of their time kind of like pursuing their passion, and they can still make a living out of it. So that was interesting for me. So there was a huge transition, like growing up and then moving to Australia and witnessing all that. At that point in time, I wasn't thinking about freelancing yet, so I got into basically a research company. And then I got into consulting, almost went into McKinsey actually. But then during my stint at my last consulting firm, which is a Swedish consulting company called BTS, I actually work with a lot of freelancers. They're all consultants, and they make a lot more money than I did back then. And they were working half the time, and they seem much happier as well. And have a lot more things going on. They can pursue their passion. They have time for their family. They can travel. So I think that kind of like was like the seedling of what became my pursuit. In freelancing. And I left that company and I became a freelancer for that company. So they paid me to do projects. I still make good money, doing half the time I used to at when I was full timing for them. And I think after a couple of years, I basically turned that into an agency, and that's kind of like my first company called IntLabs. And until today, we've been operating for about 7 years. We basically leverage the freelancing model as well, where we run like consulting projects and we tap into our network of consultants and coaches to basically provide the service for our client. And I think 2 years in, I started another company, again, leveraging this whole concept of whatever you want to call it, fractionalized talents, on-demand talent, but basically freelancing. We started Ravenry, which is a research company. And again, tapping into a network of freelance researchers all around the world to provide our clients with very localized insights. And 2 years ago, we decided to kind of like take a piece of the tech out of our business in Ravenry and turn it into Solos, which is a portfolio builder for freelancers and creators. So that's kind of like I guess a bit of about me in a nutshell, in a pretty big nutshell, I would say.
That's a lot. That's a lot packed into 10 years, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
why? So this is fascinating to me. Why? Why move to? Okay, why not just say, "Hey, I'm going to create a freelance marketplace. That's it." Why not just settle there?
Yeah, so I think I personally encountered a few challenges with the mostly public marketplaces, right? We know a few of them. They are very successful. I think a lot of the marketplaces that are really big, they are generally more for, I guess, design work, like all these like creatives. But there's not really a space for someone who's more in the professional service segment, which is where I was at, right? I was doing consulting, I was doing, coaching, and I was basically providing research services. And there's no such category of marketplace for freelancers like me. So I thought that there was definitely an opportunity there, especially because I just witnessed my own consulting firm, working with so many freelancers, and they pay them millions of dollars every year. And this is one company, right? So yeah, I mean that's literally why, like, I thought, I needed to start something on my own, and I did. Actually, I did start with a freelancer marketplace that is kind of like open to public, and all of these so-called researchers, they can sign up, and that's when all the problems started as well. So the first MVP was actually with Ravenry, when I thought, okay, look, let's invest in a marketplace, a technology built marketplace, and let people sign up as a researcher, and then we give them projects, right? But the problem, I think, with like professional services category is that the clients have very high expectations because they generally pay a lot of money for this service, and the kind of output that's being used can be quite objectively measured, its quality itself, right? You can tell if, like a recommendation or a research piece is, done properly or not, right? So as a result of that, the marketplace model where anyone can just say they can do this, they can do that, did not really work. And we actually turned that into, I guess, I would say we still have like the marketplace tool or technology, but we just close it up and we only invite specific people to join once we've vetted them. And that experience is so much better for us and also for our clients, because we don't have to stress ourselves over, poor experience that clients have, angry clients, and, freelancers that don't show up, and at the same time, I think the kind of clients that we get are mostly corporates, right? So once they have like a really good experience with this vetted group of people, they just keep coming back, and it's just much easier for us once we close that marketplace. The so-called marketplace, we just close it down, I guess, and make it private. And it works much better in our favor.
And were you? Yeah, that's how do I say, that's aligned with totally what we see with marketplaces, right? Very seldom do
Yeah.
marketplaces work when it's just like a Craigslist type match.
Yeah.
So then, did you start to take over like the project management, or was vetting consultants, was that kind of enough?
Yes, that's a great question. When we started, we actually took on the project management role, mostly because in Ravenry, we do relatively large and complex. We do relatively large and complex like research projects, right? And most of the time, the client will require experts in, let's say, Indonesia, and then another expert in, let's say, Thailand. Maybe about the same thing, about let's say semiconductor, right? But they need people in these different countries to understand the landscape of those markets. And oftentimes that means you need someone to coordinate all that, right, with all these people and then the client. So we actually took on the project management role in-house at Ravenry to make sure the experience is great. But recently, I think as early as 2022, 21, we started to even train up project managers who are freelancers, and they basically serve as a buffer. When our in-house project managers got busy, with projects, we can tap into this network of people who can also support us whenever we need to.
That makes total sense. So it's typical like project management as a service, having the freelancers do their project management. And what
That's right.
I mean, do most projects have this? Like, is there a percentage of projects that have the project management layer with it, or what would you say with that?
Yeah. So again, depends on the projects. Most of our projects are relatively large and complex. So we do
Yeah.
encourage our clients to work with our project managers. But there are some clients that are a lot more sophisticated with research. And these are clients who are usually from consulting industry themselves. And in those situations, they might opt to want to work directly with the freelance researchers because, they might have their own process, they might have very specific needs and they don't really need the handholding as much as other clients. So in those situations, we are okay to let the clients work directly with the freelancers. But I think what we've observed, at least in Southeast Asia, is that most clients are not as comfortable working with freelancers, especially like in the research category, because it's so niche, it's so specific, right? And managing these people and the framework you use are all very different.
I love how specialized it is. Like
Yeah.
I absolutely love. How did you know? How have you balanced that? Right? Because did you just replicate yourself in terms of what you were doing as a consultant? Did you look and say, "Hey, there's a large TAM here"? Like, how have you balanced the specialization aspect of this?
Yeah, so the research, I guess, niche was a little bit of a happy accident, I would say. I mean, I started my career as a researcher myself, right? And to be, I guess, to clarify, when I say research, I'm talking about market research, right? Not like all those lab or science research.
Please find me
So
a vacation, Ricky. Just kidding.
yeah, so yeah, that's literally like I think that might be one of the first questions we got from our clients because when we started that business back then, a lot of our clients are media companies and they just wanted us to do research for the article. So they just like, oh, Ricky,
Oh,
can you like
interesting.
help me figure out like where to go to Thailand? We are writing a piece for like I don't know Forbes or for like whatever. So that was literally the MVP, right? But I think we kind of fell into it mostly because we and again like just connecting the dots. I started another company before, Int Labs, which is also like based on this. It's a consulting company based on a network of freelancers as well, right? But I think with consulting and with the consultants type profile, they are very expensive. They want to get paid a lot for their time, right? So to them, doing like the on the desk research work or doing the interview, on the ground, the field work, they don't want to do that. And that's kind of like when I realized that hey, there's actually a space for this, and it's within the same value chain of my business, right? It's like you do the research and then you do the consulting, So it kind of like makes sense for me to explore that category. And yeah, we started like with a few really, really small projects. I remember my first project was $100 for one project.
Oh
And
my god.
yeah, it was like so small, but it was the whole point was like to see if anyone would pay for it. And we actually got loads of requests because it's only $100, right? So everyone's like, oh, let's go for it. Like even if it's bad, it's only $100, right? But that kind of like gave me the confidence and the validation that I needed to go into the research niche. And I guess to answer your question, like how do you balance that niche with being overly specialized, right? So I think for us, it at the beginning it was quite challenging because we were trying to figure out like even within research, like how broad or how narrow do you want to go, right? So I mentioned one of the first few projects we had was more like article research or thought leadership research, and I think eventually and we did a lot of like bigger project, like let's say a client has a biosensor and they need to figure out what's the application of this biosensor in healthcare, let's say, right? And that's such a different research from like, hey, tell me where are the 10 top places to go to when I'm in Thailand. Very different. And I guess for us, having done a lot of that, what we use as a litmus test was mostly the value of the project, given the amount of resources that's required to do a good job. And that's when we started to eliminate like the more like I guess the lightweight questions, the ones that you can answer within like 24 hours, because it takes the same amount of effort, to be honest with you, to do the research, and then the clients will come back and revise as well and ask you questions. So the effort to manage that kind of project is is not as easy as it sounds, right? It's still like requires a lot of effort. So we thought, why don't we just take on bigger projects, get paid a lot more for the same amount of time spent managing a project or doing a research. And that's kind of like how we found the balance, I guess, and we landed on this more I guess hand-holding type complex project niche in the market research segment.
Yeah, no, dude, I love how quick you guys iterated and learned, and it wasn't like, hey, I have the most beautiful idea ever and everyone's gonna love it. It's like, no, no, like okay, looks like there's opportunity here, opportunity here, opportunity here. Okay, that was a dud in terms of $100 research questions. Okay, let's just pivot. But so let's talk about the clients, because
Hmm.
I think this is where we're going to get into, okay, where does Southeast Asia stand compared to, say, Europe or the US? But so your clients, they're all what's the distribution look like? Are most in Southeast Asia?
So when we started about 5 years ago, most of them are very concentrated in Singapore. And as you know,
Okay,
Singapore is a bit different from the rest of Southeast Asia.
I know, I
Yeah.
know.
So a bit more sophisticated type, large corporates, usually like multinational companies, that's headquartered in Singapore, right? That's kind of like the starting point for us. That's the clients that we serve the most. But now I think 5 years in, we work with quite a lot of Indonesian companies, mostly technology companies. They do a lot of research. They are very, I guess, uh, they care a lot about data. They care a lot about user insights. So I think that category of customers start to grow. In the emerging markets like Indonesia, we have a lot of clients in Thailand, Vietnam. But I have to say, the in terms of like proportion, we still have disproportionate number of clients from countries like Japan, from the
Oh,
Netherlands,
interesting.
from the UK. Um, just because I think they are the kind of they're a lot more sophisticated when it comes to research, and they're willing to spend as well. Whereas I guess customers or clients in Indonesia, they'd rather like try and fail and learn from that rather than like pre-invest or prepay for research to avoid those mistakes. So I guess the mindset is a bit different. Yeah.
It's so interesting. How have you seen the client the okay, actually first off, do you even say freelance in your client meetings? Like, do they even care that it's freelance, or you just focus on the market research?
We don't actually mention like we don't use the word freelance. I think it's
I
just
feel
got
like
that really negative connotation. I mean, personally, I have no problem with it, but I think having tested the market with that word, I think people have that perception of, oh, they are not like then they might not be very good. They might be very inconsistent. So we avoid using that. We just say network, our network of experts, our network of researchers. That's kind of like what we use now. But effectively, they're freelancers.
yeah. And do you see it opening up in Singapore? Like, for example, was it really tough at first where now it's started to open up? Are there any, because we would hear, so it started a company in Singapore in 2020, right? And it was for
Mm,
freelancers. And it was interesting. The adoption was way behind the US
mhm.
in terms of they thought freelance equaled unemployed. Now,
Yep.
COVID pretty quickly changed that, but it still was there. And so, how would you say the overall like cultural acceptance has been of freelance?
I have to say again, like I want to separate Singapore with the rest of Southeast Asia. I think in Singapore, the market is definitely more open to the concept of using on-demand freelance talents. They're definitely more open. I've worked with a lot of large organizations that actively pursue like freelance talents, just because I think most of the time they have a certain edge, they have a certain skill set that your full timer don't. So I think Singapore companies are a lot more sophisticated in that sense. I think in Southeast Asia, ex Singapore, like Indonesia, the term freelancer is still it's just got super negative connotation. It's like this
So
unemployed group of
interesting.
people. They basically don't work. They sometimes do odd jobs. That's kind of like the perception.
Yeah.
And I think, funnily enough, when I was in Thailand, I used the word freelancer, and it was a connotation being used to euphemize like sex worker,
Oh
which
my
I thought
God,
was really
really?
which exactly culturally, like that was kind of like the perception. So
Interesting.
you mentioned freelance in a corporate setting, they're like, what kind of talent are you bringing on board? So it's quite funny. Yeah, it's quite
It's
funny.
a fun
But
meeting.
I had to learn it like the hard way and the embarrassing way when I was in Thailand.
There's no better way, man. There's no better way. Is that one? So
Yeah.
then we were like, "Hey, do you guys expect that I am a sex worker?" Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
that makes an
Yeah.
interesting meeting. Yeah, that lines up. And I mean, in general, like how have you seen? So these are mostly like mostly Singaporean MNCs, and are they looking at this? Are they saying, "Hey, this is a strategic sourcing channel for us"? Are they looking at this and saying, "Hey, this is just like one-off times when we need someone"? How have you seen their adoption of this?
I would say that it's still, I'm not sure about the US and Europe, But
Yeah.
I think in Singapore, I think first of all, let's look at the market, right? I think the talents themselves are generally more risk averse. So you don't
Interesting.
find as many freelancers, like proportionally speaking, in Singapore compared to the rest of the world, just because for some reason I think they prefer like the stability of full time
It's
job.
the iron rice bowl, man. Come on. I, I
That's right.
I remember hearing very vividly about your yeah. Why would we let our kid not have the iron rice bowl? Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, like it's just not common, and in fact, I think it's sometimes frowned upon still, even though it's less so than the rest of Southeast Asia. I think there are specific industries that are more open to working with freelancers, or people going and becoming a freelancer, and those are mostly the creative industries, the media industries. There's definitely a lot of those people who are freelancing in that space, but I think for the other industries, not so much. And honestly, I don't think it's progressed that much in specifically Singapore.
So
Um,
interesting.
in markets outside of Singapore in Southeast Asia, I think freelancing is becoming more popular. And I think there's this movement, mostly because let's use Indonesia. I spent a lot of time in Indonesia, and I work with a lot of freelancers here. In Indonesia, right? Like the challenge of to get a full time job is extremely high. You have 240 million people, but all the big companies are in Jakarta, and there's only like 10 million people in Jakarta, right? Out of the only 10 million people, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
what do the rest of the 230 million people do if they are in the professional service space, creative space, if they want to get a job in consulting, training, coaching, arts, design? They have to freelance, right? So I do see that for the population in markets like Indonesia, the supply of freelancers has been increasing, and that
Hmm.
definitely was helped by COVID. And a lot of these freelancers are also very good. They are a
Hmm.
lot more sophisticated than I would say the previous generation. Let's say early 2000 freelancers, right? They're a lot more sophisticated because the tools that are available for them now, there's just a lot more of them, right? A lot more now. You can buy you can get a software subscription for like $10. You get Canva Pro. In the past, like Adobe Photoshop will cost you like an arm and a leg, for an individual in Indonesia, right? So I think like the lowered barrier into like some of these tools available, some of these resources, some of this network forums online where people exchange notes and learn from each other definitely helped. The other thing that I think is driving like growth in freelancing in like Southeast Asia ex Singapore is also the growth of social media. And with
Huh.
social media, you have a lot more content creators, right? And people are using this e-commerce platforms, social media platforms as a way to make money. And when you have like an influencer, like that's super successful and that is kind of like the role model of everyone, like people started to kind of like see that and idolize that lifestyle. And freelancing is usually the first step into getting into those industries. In addition to that, there is that like domino effect. A freelance, like an influencer or social media creator, right? They'll need a team, right? They'll need like a designer, a content creator, a scriptwriter, a copywriter, and most of those people are freelancers as well. So they themselves will employ freelancers or work with freelancers to help build their own brand, right? So I think some of this, like the combination of some of these trends, is definitely driving, um, I guess, normalization of freelancing in Southeast Asia, and I do expect that it's gonna grow in Southeast Asia.
And it's so interesting to me though because you are your talent, and is your talent mostly Singaporean based, Indonesian based? Where do most of where most of the talent come from?
And most of the talents are spread across the world, with I guess a concentration in Southeast Asia.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And but what's so interesting is like your talent, it's not similar to an influencer, right? Like it's not
No,
similar to an influencer. So that's where I find it so interesting is like there's always been freelancers in social media content creation. And so
yeah,
like there's always been freelance writers. That's never not been true.
yeah,
There's kind of been consultants, but the consultants were always individuals that instead of retiring ended up consulting. And so
that's right. Yeah,
consulting, right? So it's like a newer, so that's one of the newer angles. Now, your talent, I imagine they don't want to be grouped in with writers in social media, right?
No, they don't. They don't.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So do you see, is there a connection between, okay, and they're technically all, this is one of the biggest problems, right? Is like we're using the word freelance, but it's really tough. Like they're actually more independent consultants than they are. So, but so do you see a connection between the more that there's this like bottoms up social media driven adoption of freelancers, does that lead to more consultants freelancing?
That's a great question. I think it definitely helps normalize the idea of freelance work and on-demand work, and indie work or indie talent, right? um, the two groups of people don't typically coincide,
Hmm.
right? So for example, I think I've mentioned to you, like, um, there are a lot of marketplaces out there for like the creative type, but
Yep.
there's not as many for the professional service type. And it's not because there hasn't been attempts at building marketplaces for these people, but for the latter group, right? But I just find that people who are a lot more, I guess, people who feel like they are more premium, they have, like, bigger value that they can bring to the table. They're more white collar. I feel like there's a certain level of arrogance of them not wanting to join marketplace, because that
Yeah.
almost is like conceding that, I'm not a good enough consultant that I can't even sell my own service myself. So I think there is that like arrogance for this group of people. So even like with in our business at Ravenry and in Labs, they don't want to be like, they don't want their name to be searched by clients in our database. They don't want to be found.
Oh,
They want
interesting.
to be like curated, like, they want the matchmaking to be done, like, what do you call it, one on one. They don't want it to be like, oh, I'm just like one of 10,000 here.
Yep.
So I think the dichotomy of the two group will probably stay for, like, two groups for a while. It's not going to blend. But it does, I think, one, like, the growth of one does definitely help, the adoption and the acceptance of the whole group.
Yeah, because in the end of the day, it's like super tactical example. I mean, let's say someone's a 50-year-old consultant and their daughter, right, their son or daughter, ends up freelancing. Then they kind of learn, oh wow, all right, you are actually making more than your full time equivalent. This
Yeah.
is real, yeah.
Yeah.
So and
Yep.
that's kind of like bottoms up how it happens.
Yep.
But so are you seeing on the client side? So you mentioned you're not using the word freelance. Are you seeing any other words, for example, fractional or digital sourcing, or literally are they just like, okay, this is network focused market research, that's enough?
Yeah, I think in my line of work, we just say network.
Okay.
It works, and it's vague enough for the client to like not question anymore, but also it's clear enough for the client not to question me anymore, but it's
Yeah.
vague enough for them to be like, oh, okay, like, I think I kind of know like what you're doing with your resources. So that's kind of like the preferred term that I use. But I think in general, it's still freelancing. It's still freelancer in Southeast Asia. I think on-demand talent and fractionalized workforce is still too it's too new to have, like, come into the vocabulary of the local companies.
It's
Yeah,
it's kind of like listen, I don't think we're ever going to have one word, to be honest.
yeah.
And even here, I say US, but it's really US and Europe because we have full global coverage. But US and Europe, it's freelance is a vague enough word that gets people started. And
Mm,
so, whether it's freelance, there's other terms like on-demand talent, liquid workforce. There's been a bunch, but
yep.
really, what we're talking about is just contract-based work that these individuals aren't full-time employees. That's really it.
Yeah.
Um, do you have to deal with, well? So is there an existing contractor or independent workforce work base in Singapore?
Sorry, do you mind repeating that question again? I'm not
Yeah,
sure I'm getting.
is there, so here, US and Europe, there's already a very large external talent industry, and within external talent we have basically contract staffing, we have
Mm,
contingent workforce, we
yeah.
have SOW work.
Yeah.
There's a massive industry that freelance is less than 1% of and
Yeah.
increasingly eating up.
Yeah.
What's that like? What's it like over there in Southeast Asia?
I think there's definitely growth in those categories. I think I see a lot of more verticalized, like talent outsourcing platforms or businesses that focus on
Gotcha.
things like legal services. Obviously, there's a lot of tech talents, companies that focus on tech talents, and basically they basically do outsource or outsource work for large companies. Um,
Gotcha.
and I think those are more acceptable for Southeast Asia because it feels like you're just contracting out work to another company, right? Not to a specific individual. So I feel
Gotcha.
like that trend is definitely growing, and especially between Singapore and the rest of Southeast Asia, mostly because of the differences in income level,
Yeah.
right? So for the same amount of money, you can hire like I don't know three similarly qualified or experienced engineers, in Indonesia. So I think that industry is definitely growing, and a lot more people are um, trying to kind of like close that gap with arbitrage, right? Price arbitrage.
Gotcha.
I am not sure if I would lump them in the same category as freelancers though, because I think most of these people they work with the agency and then the agency contract them out, right? So I'm not sure I would lump them together as freelancer, but there's definitely a lot more options for organizations and a lot more modality through which they can work with talents on a more flexible basis.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's pivot into why in the world. So things are going well, right? And
Yep.
then you go, okay, I'm going to start a new company called Solos.
Okay.
Why? What's going on? You're busy enough, and and I will
Yeah.
say, the website is beautiful. So for all of our
Thank you.
listeners, if you go to Solos period work, and I really appreciate that you're also using the dot work whatever thing, because people still get confused with ours, and even like emails they'll do like humancloudwork.com, and you're like, no,
Yeah.
no, it's humancloud.work. But so I appreciate we're
Yep.
finally pushing the dot work. But
Yeah.
for listeners, the website is beautiful. So I'm also going to ask you very selfishly how you built this. But why in the world? Come on, Ricky, you're busy enough.
Why in the world? So I just okay, so there's another part of the story that I haven't really talked about when it comes to freelancers, right? And I think I come from Southeast Asia, and there's not a lot of opportunities here. And as I mentioned before, in Indonesia itself, the jobs are mostly concentrated in like Jakarta, and that's like 10 million people fighting for like a few jobs. So what about the rest of Southeast Asia? What about the rest of the people who's not living in Jakarta, right? So I think one of the things that I really believe in is that I want to use this idea or this concept of freelancing and empower as many people as possible. And back, if you look at like both Ravenry and IntLabs, they're still very focused on the top tier talents, people who are very very experienced and are able to kind of like command like a lot of fees for their time. But how about people who's starting out, right? So when I spun off Solos, one of the vision that we have is that we want to help as many people as possible to get started in this journey, right? And what better way to do that than to have a nice place to build your portfolio, to build your credibility, to have a little website to show people that, hey, like, look, I can look very professional. I've done all this work. And that is the simple reason why, we started Solos, is because we want to empower more people to go and kind of like, see that this option, this career path is extremely viable, and we want to make it as easy as possible for people to build their website and their portfolio, and as cheaply as possible as well. That's really the reason.
I love it. And what does success look like for you with this? Are you hoping that Solos is a venture backable unicorn? Are you hoping that this is a lifestyle linear type business? What are you hoping for this? And I'd love to hear too, like,
Yeah.
because you're not the first, but no
Yeah.
one's really claimed it, and I don't think anyone's ever going to fully claim it. And what you're going after, based off looking at the features, there's a lot of room here. There's a lot of room in terms of being able to capture value. But so what are you hoping for with it?
Yeah. I guess what it would look like, I would have to refer to, I guess, the role model of my company, which is Basecamp. I really love what Jason Fried and what DHAs have done with, initially an agency that, started to churn out products and became like, this product with like a strong cult following. I really would love for me to be able to be a part of that kind of company or build that kind of company where, I want to have a company that truly control our own destiny. I want to be able to basically work towards our vision, unencumbered by investors and other people whispering in your ear to go IPO and stuff like that, or fundraise again. I want to keep the company to sub 100 people. I'm talking specifically for solos, yeah? Because I think that's when you can still feel like a family, and like you can still have this sense of like what's going on, in a company. Who's who you're working with, right? And really empower these 100 people as well to follow and pursue their passion, right? And I hope that because we're only keeping it to 100 people, we can get like the best people who's most passionate about freelancing, creator economy, whatever you want to call it, right? That we're doing, that we're trying to build for, and that's really kind of like the picture of success for me.
Gotcha. So what would you say? What would you what would you say is the largest, or a couple largest problems our space has right now?
I think, okay, I'm speaking again from the perspective of someone being in Southeast Asia. Definitely resources and education. Not
Gotcha.
a lot of resources are available for people in this part of the world because, again, language barrier. I'm sure there's a lot of like English, language content, right? But there's not enough for people here to get started. And I think there's not enough role model of people building in this space, being successful, and being public about it, and being an advocate for this, movement, if you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is the biggest challenge. Is that there's a lot of people who want to do it. Some because they need to, they have no other options, right? That is viable. Some because they want to, but it's just that they don't have the steps. They don't have the best practices, the playbook to do it well in Southeast Asia.
Yep. So okay. So getting those big wins, yeah, that makes total sense. And how closely connected, or would you say, Southeast Asia to U.S., Europe? Like I think, because personally I think, I'll say Singapore here, but Singapore, I think it's still 2 to 5 years behind when it comes to adoption, right? And then I think adoption is driven by acceptance, and so it kind of goes adoption, then acceptance, and then usually supply. But how closely connected is it? Like, for example, with the big wins, can you walk into a Singaporean CMO and say, well, look what the US did? And like, yeah, so how closely connected are the cultures?
I think certain markets are more connected to the US than others, right? So let's say Philippines. I think they are very, very influenced, and very connected to the US. I think speaking the same language helps. They have very similar interests, like big on basketball, huge on these things. So it just helps. Like I mean, let's just use language as the only like the only reason why they're connected. It helps so much because I think the amount of money you make in the Philippines versus if you're freelancing for like an American company, the gap is huge, right? So why don't you do the work for this client across the ocean, and maybe you have to stay up a bit later every night, but it makes a huge difference to them, to their life, right? So I think certain markets are definitely more connected. I think the challenge with Indonesia is that majority of the population is still very they're still very focused on bahasa, so they don't work well across different languages and different cultures. They're still very domestic. I would say Thailand, we work with a lot of Thai clients as well. They're also very inward looking in the sense that they look at talents. They have a lot of freelancers, but most of the time they work with the talents that is based in Thailand, and then the talents also work with the Thai companies. It's quite rare to see even Thai talents going to Singapore, vice versa, right? And Indonesian talents like working for Singapore companies, let alone the US, right? So I think there's definitely some connection with some markets, but it's not evenly spread.
That's so interesting. Yeah. Listen, man, I want to give you, we'll say, 5 minutes
Okay.
The stage is yours.
Okay.
Literally, you can talk about whatever you want, because I think, my big learnings from this is what I would call the power of specialization,
Mm-hmm.
meaning the power of already being good at something and then applying freelance networks, not necessarily saying, let me build a freelance marketplace for the sake of a freelance marketplace. So that's the first thing I learned. I think the second thing I learned is you got to be passionate about the space, meaning you didn't just hop in and hop out. You're now building a new company in the space, and your goal is not to be, a venture backed unicorn, which I think is incredible. But so those are the two things that I'm walking away going, damn, that's awesome. There's also little things like the project management layer, which is crucial. We've seen that across the globe. But listen, 5 minutes, whatever the hell you want to talk about, Ricky, you can hit on where you hope the space goes. You can hit on why people should freelance. You should hit on why clients should adopt. You can be as self-promotional as you want. You can literally just pitch Ravenry and send it whatever you want. But the stage is yours, my friend.
Thanks. Wow. Okay. 5 minutes of freedom. I think maybe I want to address like I want to start by addressing like I guess the people who's building in this space, and there's a lot, right? And by building, I mean like they're trying to build a company, that empowers freelancers, or they're trying to build a new way of working with talents, and like a new system or a new technology to allow them to tap into like a network of talents. I think definitely don't look at the current models as a starting point, and don't look at like I would say the marketplace model versus like the SaaS model as like your starting point when you're thinking about your business, because I made that mistake. I was like, I went into it, I was like, oh, I want to start by being a marketplace, and then like the way I pivoted was like, no, marketplace doesn't work, it has to be SaaS. Then it's kind of like looking at the business model first rather than like what the problem is, what. And again, like we are not talking when we talk about freelancers, it's not like a one-way conversation as well. You're dealing with so many different stakeholders. You're talking to the freelancers, you're talking to the clients, you're talking to your team who's, if you're building a marketplace, you have to deal with both, right? So I think understanding very clearly like what is the industry you want to solve for, what is the main pain point for that industry, and just start to serve that industry first before building anything is, I think, like would have been the best advice anyone could have given me when I started building in this space, which is just, hey Ricky, you're trying to do this research freelancing thing, just do the research first and like figure out how to like staff it with the freelancers later and then build the platform later. Because what I did was the reverse, right? I built the platform, I bring the people, and I was like, where are the clients? So like I think like reversing that a little bit would be amazing for someone who's starting out. Just like try to find a problem, talk to the people in the industry, and like do what like they want to throw money at first. So and then from there build your product, build your concept, build your business model, whatever after, right? Get the money first. Get the money first. Customers money is the best money. And then I guess the other thing that I want to talk about is probably more, I guess it's just an observation or maybe a comment on the enterprise side, right? I think the challenge, and I've tried to build enterprise platform, where they basically can build, like they can use this white label platform to manage all their freelancers. And in Southeast Asia, it didn't work. Mostly because I think the perception of the organization is that these freelancers are just vendors. So vendor management system, the traditional one, still works, right? So why do I have to go through the hassle of doing it? And I think there are a few companies in Southeast Asia that's already kind of like changing their mindset around this, realizing that working with individuals require very different, way of working, and therefore different systems, different procurement process than when you're working with a agency or a large company or an SME, right? And I think there's definitely a space in this area, and I'm hoping that more companies, corporates, are willing to take the plunge and try out, working with freelancers and, tapping into this network of usually very, very driven people, and they're usually very good at what they're doing, and basically try to build your talent strategy around these people, right? I think to me that is the first step, for the market or the industry, the first step for the corporate to take, right? For the industry to really like make a huge change, because people like us who's trying to build the platform, the solutions, the software, the product, we can't really truly serve, the market if they are not willing to try this out, they are not willing to change, and they are not willing to take the risk and take the plunge into this new way of working. And honestly, for the companies that I've seen tried this model, it's paid off multiple times for them, right? Because think about it, right? Like nowadays, you need more and more specialized people. You can't have generalists anymore, right? At the same time, specialized people, you can't have them, sitting on your bench the entire year on a payroll, because you might need them only on specific projects. Yeah. So what better way to optimize your cost, resourcing, and the talent quality that you get than using a flexible work model, right? And I really encourage all these companies to just give it a try, work with a few of these talents in sandbox of a team, see how it goes, and hopefully people like us can build for you eventually.
Damn, Ricky, that was awesome. That was way better than 5 minutes of a comedy show or something like that. That was great.
And listen, if you need research, come to Ravenry.
There we go. Hell
That's
yes.
what you're expecting, right?
as any good CEO should do, right? But listen, last question for you is where's your favorite dim sum place? And then followed by actually, where's your favorite foot massages as well?
Ooh, okay. Dim sum, there's a lot in Singapore, so I think I'll skip that one, because I think that's enough. But foot massage, I've got one place that made me cry, and it's called Rejuve. Rejuve as in like rejuvenate, Rejuve.
Where is it?
Near Bendemeer MRT in Bendemeer MRT, and you have to go to this masseuse. Her name is Ayen. She is. She's gonna destroy you, but you'll be grateful to her afterwards.
Listen, man, I can't tell you how much I miss Sweet Tune, and then doing the foot massages after. And if I had your recommendation, it was the best Sunday ever.
I've never combined that. I'll give it a try next time.
Oh,
like dim sum and then foot massage. Okay,
it's the best, because after dim sum, what's the last? You just want to go take a nap, and so then you end up go taking a nap for an hour. It's so awesome, Ricky. This has been absolutely incredible. Where can our listeners find you?
Thank you, Matt. Well, I'm on Twitter a lot nowadays, so my Twitter handle is Ricky Willianto, and LinkedIn, which is also Ricky Willianto.
Do you actually stay up to date on Twitter?
I'm trying to build Solos, man. Like all the freelancers, indie hackers, builders, creators, creatives, they're all hanging out there. So I'm trying to build a bit more, street cred on X now, or Twitter.
I'll stick with my boring enterprise life, Ricky. I tried it for like 2 days. I was like, I can't do this shit. All right, Ricky, thank you so much for hopping on.
Thanks, man.